Before we begin the next section of reading, I just want to remind you that if you see words in bold, these are important terms. We will be doing an activity next week. We'll take a side break from our activities to create a vocabulary slideshow to keep track of the different vocabulary terms that we are coming across. But start paying extra attention to them and what they mean. Try to use them in your stop to think questions as well as your analysis questions. Also, as I'm reading, you've probably noticed I say side note. When I say side note, I'm going to elaborate on a topic before I continue on with the reading. So that is the signal that it's not in the sentence itself, but it's something that I'm adding to it. So we are going to begin sexual reproduction. Now, while some animals can reproduce asexually and sexually, oh, that's a mind blower, side note. Humans and many other animals can only reproduce sexually. An offspring produced by sexual reproduction inherits traits. Those are those, side note, those are those characteristics, things that you have in common that you can see, like physical characteristics and behaviors from two parents, not one. You are not a perfect copy of either of your parents. You also are not a perfect blend of your parents' traits. Side note, that means you're not 50-50. Exactly half of your parent, each parent comes together and makes like a mixture of the two, okay? Instead, it's not just a blend. Instead, what happens is you'll have certain characteristics just from your father and certain characteristics just from your mother. Not a mix of the two. Not an intermediate. Okay, going back to reading. What determines which traits you get from each parent? Sexual reproduction occurs when a tiny sperm cell, side note, put your mature hats on now. Let's go back. Produced by a male unites with an egg cell produced by a female, as shown on the next page. Sperm, egg. Each of these cells, called sex cells, has only one set of genes. This means the sex cells have half the number of genes present in the rest of the organism's body cells. This union of the sperm and the egg is called fertilization. The cell that results from fertilization will have 2 copies of every gene. Side note, remember, the sex cells only have half the number, 1 copy. So when they come together, they have the full set, 2 copies. Okay, let's go back. The cell that results from fertilization will have 2 copies of every gene, with 1 set of genes from the egg and 1 set of genes from the sperm. Because genes help determine traits, side note, genes are in your cell. That's the genetic information. That's the information that the cell carries. Okay, it's on this like little microscopic molecule. There's information actually encoded there. That's what the genes are. Because genes help to determine traits, sexual reproduction produces a new cell that develops into an individual with traits inherited from both parents. As the organism grows, the fertilized egg produces more cells that have 2 sets of genes and are genetically identical to this fertilized egg. This new individual will be different from each of its biological parents. Also, because no 2 sperm or egg cells contain exactly the same genetic information, no 2 offspring produced by the same parent are identical. A unique set of inherited genes causes a unique set of inherited traits in each sexually reproduced offspring of the same 2 parents. Side note, we will cover why these sperm and egg are not exactly alike down the road, okay? But just know that each person's sperm or egg, depending on if they're male or female, they're not exactly the same. They're all going to be unique. There is an exception to the last statement. Identical twins. Identical twins result when one fertilized egg splits before beginning to grow and develop. The two eggs then become two genetically identical offspring or children. Only one fertilization occurs, but two organisms are produced. Asexual and sexual reproduction are summed up in the table below. Type of reproduction. In asexual, you have one parent. Offspring or clones are identical to parents. In sexual reproduction, there are two parents. Offsprings inherit traits from both parents. Stop to think number 3. Fraternal twins result when two eggs are released at the same time. So you have two eggs, not one egg. Two eggs are released at the same time, are both fertilized by different sperm cells, and both develop into offspring. This is very common in dogs and cats. Why are identical twins much more similar than fraternal twins? Explain. Hint. Side note, think about the number of eggs. Pause the video, answer the question before going on.